So they have the 70 people that went down to Mitzrayim over here, including Serach, Yocheved, Dina, and obviously the Shvatim and all their children. And then they also have a calendar of all the months of Nisan, all the days of Nisan, the year when they left Mitzrayim. So as we start this new Parsha class, with Parsha Beshalach, it's actually very appropriate because we're dealing with this year 2448. That's the year when they left.
Yeah.
Mitzrayim. So you're Mitzrayim.
Join the class.
Of course. So yeah.
Where's the picture?
In Parshas Beshalach,
Okay.
which is on page 366, Parshas Beshalach. So it's a very special parsha to start this this group on because it is Shabbos Shira. It's the Shabbos of song because the nation of Israel sang a song after they left Mitzrayim. Leaving Mitzrayim is a fundamental thing that we remember, not just here and there, every single day. And when we do mitzvahs, when we make kiddush, all these mitzvahs, we remember Zecher L'Tzias Mitzrayim. Why? Because Mitzrayim was when we became a nation. Mitzrayim is everything, is all our ability. So, the parasha starts off, Vayhi Beshalach Parai es ha'am, when Parai sent out the people. Hashem didn't take them straight to Eretz Yisrael. Instead, they traveled for what was going to be for 40 years. Now, it wasn't really a 40-year travel. It was a much shorter than that travel. But it ended up being 40 years because of, we'll see later, with the Chet Egel, with the sin, with the golden calf. But I'm trying to see if they have a map of the travels. They don't have a map of the travels. But, we'll get to that. But right now, we've slowed down. Bereshis is very, very fast. It's 2,000 years from Adam until, really more than 2,000 years, until the end of Yosef. And then Shemos, Vayikra, Bamidbar, and Devarim all span only 40 years. Really, that's maybe a drop more if you count in the time they were in Egypt. A couple of years at the end of the 210 years. But it's a crazy thing when you think about how the Torah is not like one parasha every 100 years. Not at all. It's Bereshis is 1,000 years in itself, and then Noach and Lecha, 1,000 years, and then everything slows down, especially when we get here, and we're up to Hebrew year 2448, maybe just before, and that was the year when they left Mitzrayim, when they left Egypt, 3,330 something years ago. So that's where we're up to now in Jewish history. Now, it's not really Jewish history because we didn't become a nation yet until we left Mitzrayim. But the parasha starts off with the nation leaving Mitzrayim, running out because Hashem had done the 10 plagues, 10 makas, and the last one was makas b'charis. Pharaoh himself was a b'char. He was spared, but he was so scared by everything going on, he said, get out, get out, get out. And he kicked them out. Beshalach means he sent them out. He sent them, go. So we are dealing with this happened on the night of the 15th of Nisan. This is Seder night. Every year we have Seder night. This is the night when it happened. Now, they said, we're not leaving in the night. Like robbers, we leave in the day. Who do you think we are? So imagine you've been in slavery for 210 years, and finally you say you can go. No, I'm going to wait till the morning. But it was a message that we're going to leave on our terms. We're not going to leave on your terms. We're going to leave on, we are going to leave when we want to leave, like kings, not like servants. And that's why the whole Seder night, one of the reasons the whole Seder night is all about acting like kings, because we left like kings. But anyway, so that's what we finished off last week's parasha with a flurry of activity, including Makas B'Feres, and now they're leaving Egypt. But instead, they didn't go straight. And the pasuk says that it was very close. Mitzrayim is very close to Israel, Eretz Yisrael, obviously. So Hashem didn't want to take them straight because he was worried they're going to go back. Now, it's crazy to think, why would they go back? Why would they go back to slavery?
The team were there, might fight them.
Right. So, that's the pasuk says. They might see a fight with the Pelishtim and they'll say, we don't want to fight. Now, many people find this hard to understand, but even before you look in Midrashim and Rashi, it's very simple. A slave never fought a fight in his life. A slave, by definition, means everything the master says, they do. So whenever they see a fight, they're like, okay, I'm out, I'm going back. That's all they know.
Oh,
You know, the line they famously say is you can take the person out of slavery, but then you have to take the slavery out of the person. And it's very true. And this is a thing that in the news recently, but everything they're struggling with in South Africa, where they did away with apartheid and slavery years ago, but still there's some, the white people in South Africa are much more successful. They're trying, what's going on, and trying to figure out. So ultimately, it's a mindset change. So Hashem said, you know what? If we're going to be becoming our own nation now, Jewish nation, we can't just go straight, because you might see a war and you're going to go right back. Okay? So therefore, he took them out, instead of going straight north. Is there a map over here? Instead of going straight north, they went out towards the Yam Suf, which is effectively going. If you look on page 1324, there's a bit of a map. You can't really see clearly, but they went east towards the Yam Suf, towards the Sea of Reeds, and the plan was to go around the Palestinian territory, and that way to get to Canaan. It wasn't yet Israel. Let's get to Canaan.
They're not go straight for.
They're not going to go straight. They're going to go around it. To avoid a war, they don't want to have any fights. They don't want any of them to go back to Mitzrayim. You have to also remember that one of the different midrashim in last week's Parsha about how many left Egypt. We see it says, Pasuk says, "V'chamushim alu b'nei Yisrael mitzrayim." They left. Literally means armed, but it's written in a strange way. So we learn from there that 1 in 5, some people say 1 in 50, left Egypt.
Yeah.
So what that tells us is that it wasn't so easy for them to leave. That's why there was a very real concern that they might go back. Anyway, so he went around. Pasuk Yud Tes 19 talks about how Moshe fulfilled the promise that they promised to Yosef 210 years earlier. He told them that one day you're going to be redeemed and take my bones away from Egypt. I don't want to be buried in Egypt. Then we learn that they were escorted by miracle. That means Hashem protected them with a pillar of smoke in the day, and in the night a pillar of fire. They would follow that in the night and the day. That's what they would travel. This was a continuous protection or a guiding path by Hashem. Okay, but it wasn't to be so simple. We're still talking about when they had just left Mitzrayim, just left Egypt, and now we move on to where Paro has a change of heart. You know, one of the things we see all about the leaders that were our enemies is that they have change of hearts. That means one day they think one thing, one day they think another thing. You can think of Achashverosh. Achashverosh killed his wife. The next day, why did I kill my wife? You know, and that's why the rabbis were very smart. When Achashverosh went to ask for advice, they didn't say anything, because if they would give advice, the next day he wakes up and he's angry. Once he had a hangover, he's going to be upset. So here as well, Paro has a change of mind. By the way, he's been changing his mind for 10 times already with all the plagues. But anyway, his heart and his servant's heart, they changed. They immediately forgot all the makkos. This is in Pasuk Hey. And they heard reports that the Jews were lost in the desert, because they knew that the Jews were heading towards Canaan, and they went east, they didn't go north. So they told them, so they said, this is a good opportunity. We're going to catch them. And I don't know what they planned to do, to kill them or bring them back. But whatever, they wanted to capture the Jews. So he says, he took 600, this is in Pasuk 6, for Pasuk 7, Pasuk Zayin. He took 600 chosen chariots, right? It's like tanks nowadays. You know, Mitzrayim was the elite in those days. And all of the chariots of Mitzrayim, and they took the troops, and they chased after the Jewish people. Meanwhile, the Jews, it was not true that they were lost in the desert. It says they were yotzim b'yad rama. They were with their head held high. Like I said, they didn't leave in the night. They left in the day. They left on their own terms, and they left with yad rama. Now, meanwhile, the Egyptians are chasing after them, and then they catch them right by the sea. Hashem deliberately led them towards the Yam Suf because he wanted to do one final nes, one final miracle, and this miracle would also wipe out all of Mitzrayim. No, it wouldn't totally wipe out Mitzrayim. Mitzrayim would actually continue to exist for, I think, about almost 1,000 years later. If we read in the Torah last week, even in the time of Nebuchadnezzar, about 400 years later, there was still more than that, like 600 years later, but there was still Mitzrayim existed. Nowadays, this is a new Egypt. It's not the same Egypt. But anyway, so it didn't wipe them out, but Hashem wanted to make one last miracle happen with the Egyptians. So they chased after them, and they catch them on their beach chairs by the sea, you see over here in the picture, by this Yam Suf, and and they were caught. Now you have to remember that the Jews at this point had despite the fact that they saw open nisim, open miracles, no, they had a very sort of a weak, you could say, emunah to some extent, like a weak belief. So they immediately saw what happened. They saw that they were trapped. They had the sea in front of them. They had the Egyptians behind them, and they said, "Oh, we're going to die here." And they said to Moshe, "Hamibli," in the next page, 370, in the verse number 11. Hamibli ein kavarim b'Mitzrayim. Is there not enough burial plots in Mitzrayim? There's got to be more burial plots. No problem.
Sorry about it.
If you need to take it, you can take it.
No, it's okay. Sorry.
And there are not enough places to bury us in Egypt that you bring us here. But it's an amazing thing, by the way, that this, that they could have such accusations. Moshe was like their leader, and had just done all these miracles by Hashem, and they still were accusing him. And this wasn't the worst thing. They fought with him later, and he had Korach, and he had many different stories coming up in the next few weeks. But it's an unbelievable idea, right?
Yeah, I'm just thinking about that. I think that the splitting of the sea is even the strongest of all the miracles, because nobody was expecting it. Like, at least all the makot that God gave, so Moses knew it's gonna. Here, nobody knew anything, and God surprised all of them, even the Egyptians. So I think I'm looking at this like the greatest miracle that happened.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, even on Seder night, so that we read about the sages, Rekiva and others, and they say, how many miracles Hashem do in Mitzrayim, and how many did he do? The idea is that wherever there was in Egypt, there's 5 times as many by the sea. And they learn it, because the finger of Hashem, the hand of Hashem, the finger is 1, the hand is 5. But the point is exactly as you say. The miracle by the sea was unexpected. It was much bigger.
Yeah.
And it was unequivocal. The Medrash says much more. The Medrash says that when the water in the sea split, every water split. So if you have somebody, I remember they used this famous picture we saw as a kid, somebody having a drink of water, and it split, and it goes down, and it's like, but it's an idea that we don't know what happened, but whatever it was unbelievable. There was no way to explain it. And by the way, this is something I struggle with very often nowadays. People say like, oh, when Korach fell in the hole, it was just an earthquake. And when the sea split, it was this. The problem with that is you have to agree that there was miracles, right? The pasuk talks about turning a stick into a snake and this and that, the blood and it. So once you say there's a miracle, how do you know how big it was, how small it was? What does it help you that you say there was an earthquake or there was this, there was that? So, like I said, we don't know exactly who is right, how many miracles happened, what level of, but we do know that it left an unbelievable impression to the point where a few days later, the whole nation said, we're willing to accept a crazy book of rules, the Torah. And we've spoken about this in Shalashuttas, about how no normal person would take upon themselves a Torah with some things you do understand and some things you don't understand. But this whole leaving Egypt, which, by the way, the Medrash compares to like giving birth, it's like extracting one nation from another nation. It was so impressive to the Jewish nation that they agreed at that point to accept the whole Torah. Okay, so Moshe said to the nation, don't have fear. This is in Pasuk Yud Gimel 13. Stand and you're going to see Yeshuat Hashem, you're going to see the salvation of Hashem. Right? Don't worry. Everything that you saw in Mitzrayim, all your troubles, your suffering is gone. You won't even need to do anything. There's famous pasuk, Hashem yilachem lachem atem tacharishim. Hashem will fight for you, and you be quiet. And you won't need to do anything. Hashem will fight for you. Okay? And then Hashem tells Moshe, this is already the third aliyah, page 370, verse 15, Hashem tells Moshe exactly what to do. Take a stick and to lift your hand and put your hand. Many people ask a question, that why does Hashem need Moshe? Is Moshe not counterproductive? Hashem at this point was trying to show that he's the boss of the world. I can make frogs and I can make wild animals and I can do all these things. And even when it came to the biggest miracle of all, which is the miracle of splitting the sea, Moshe, stick out your hand and the sea will split. Why? Why can't Hashem just split the sea? Why does he need Moshe to stick out his hand?
Maybe God's doing it for Moses, that the people will start seeing the greatness of Moses and his closeness to God, because he is going to be the leader. He's going to be the person who's going to turn them to be nation.
Mm-hmm.
It's a huge role.
So that's a good, yeah. So to show them that he had a connection to God, and therefore they should trust him. You know, interestingly, it could be that backfired because they were so obsessed with Moshe when he went up to get the Torah and he was a little bit delayed. They said, "Oh, we need a new one," and then they made a golden calf. So maybe, but that's a very interesting idea. All right. I was thinking also because I think I just made it up, but it could be Hashem wanted to send a message that I need you to do something. Everybody knows you put your hand out, water doesn't split. But the idea of ishtadlut, that in this world we don't get things for free. You know, you can't just sit back and expect money or whatever it is. We have to work. And the same when it comes for miracles or spirituality. We're in this world to do work. So Hashem says, just take the first step. Stick out your hand. I know, you know, that's really what this world is about. We do a small thing and Hashem does the rest. So maybe.
It's like the man, you know, that came down. So people had to go into with the man to work with. You're right.
I mean, like Hashem used Moshe for a purpose.
Right. So as she said, that maybe Hashem was showing that you can trust Moshe. Like he's going to be a leader.
Right.
He's connected. So he told them, I'm going to, and in the last pasuk on page 370, Yud Zayin 17, he says, I'm going to come down hard on Paro. I'm going to be glorified through Paro and through his army and through the chariots. Like everything that's going to happen here is going to leave an impression forever. V'yadu Mitzrayim, top of page 372. Egypt is going to know that I am Hashem when I do this. Then the pasuk talks about exactly how the miracle happens. It talks about how the night beforehand there was both the smoke and there was the cloud and there was the darkness and there was the fire and then there was a wind that was going the whole night, and eventually the water was split. And not only that, this is one of the key words that we see over and over again, Becharava. There was dry land in the sea. There was dry land in the sea. Now, many commentators ask, like, why is that important? You know, not only is it important, it goes over and over again. It says that the Jewish nation, they passed through Becharava, on the dry land. There was water on the right and on the left. And they explained, because this wasn't just a miracle to get rid of the Egyptians. It was a miracle to show Hashem's love for the Jews. Now, to kill the Egyptians, all you needed to do is open the sea, the Jews go through, and then the Egyptians go through, and then put the water on them. But the idea of the land being dry showed that Hashem took an extra step so that the Jews shouldn't struggle as they walk through. And Hashem says, you know, I love you. You know, this is my extra gift to you to make it comfortable for you. And the Midrashim talk about how each tribe had their own tunnel in the water, own pathway in the water, and they could put their hand in the walls and take whatever fruit they want in those trees. And all of that is to speak to that this miracle wasn't done just to get rid of the Egyptians. Hashem could have done that many different ways. He could have dropped all the water on top of them. But he did it to show the difference between the Jews and the Egyptians. And one of the reasons why this was so important was because for 210 years, the Jews lived amongst the Egyptians, and they became like the Egyptians. Now, we know some things they didn't change. The language, their clothes, and the names, they didn't change. But everything else, they were Egyptians. It was very hard to tell the difference. Who was an Egyptian, who was... And not only that, the Jews themselves didn't really know, do we feel special? And even more than that, many people left with the Jews. The Erev Rav, as we'll see later on. There was a whole gang of Egyptians that left with the Jews, and later on caused them to stumble, caused them to do different sins. So the Jews were like all confused. Who are we? Remember, they weren't Jews, they weren't a nation, they were just a family 210 years earlier that somehow grew because they had so many children. So Hashem was showing there's a difference between you two, and you are going to get the red carpet, comfortable, dry land to walk through in the sea, and Egyptians are not. They're going to get the opposite. And one last thing. This is why it actually is brought down that if you check the path which they took, they didn't come out on the other side.
Oh, yeah, they turn around.
They did a semicircle. They came out on the same side, and everybody asked, "What's the point of that? If they could have gone around, they should." The answer is Hashem was showing them, I didn't actually part the sea to get you from A to B, or to get you through it.
Yeah.
I split the sea just to show you that I love you. I split the sea to show you that I did it just for the sake of it, to show there's a difference between the Jews and the Egyptians. So it's a very beautiful.
We're just thinking, Rabbi, the Egyptians, they worship, the Nile, water. So it's also another side here to show that the water is bound down to the Israelites. It drives the Egyptian crazy when they said that the water is like surrounding, to the Hebrews.
Yeah, that's nice. That's nice. Yeah. They serve the Nile.
And I wanted also to say, Rabbi, some people say, oh, this wasn't, I heard this, people say, this wasn't a miracle of God. At the time that the water went down, even if the water went down, the land, as you said, wouldn't be dry. So how can you say that? It's impossible to even to imagine that it wasn't a miracle. It's no way.
100%. That's why over and over again he uses this word. I don't know any other time in the Torah this word charava comes.
Exactly.
But it comes in Beshalach probably like 5 to 10 times. Because, and even if you look in Pasuk Chaf Aleph 21, Vayasam esayam lacharava. He made the sea into dry land. So I don't know. Right. That's why, if those scientists will tell you it's, it's just the water went down and everything, but how would it be dry? It uses the word bayabasha also. The word yabasha comes from yavesh, which means dry. It's not just aretz or adama. Yavesh, yabasha. Yabasha is a Hebrew word for dry land. We always used to translate this in school as dry land, not just land, dry land. Because that's what yabasha is. It's not eretz, it's not adama. So 100%. That's why I don't think you see the word anywhere aretz or adama, not one time. Every single time it's either yabasha, either charava, and like in Pasuk Chaf Aleph 21, or yabasha in Pasuk Chaf Beis. Now, what's the difference between these two? I don't know. Oh, actually, no. Charava is damp land, and then later on there was another stage when it was dry land. That's how they translate it over here. Let me see Rashi. Interesting, yeah. The Malbim, that comes from the Malbim, they bring down here. The Malbim says that, I always thought Charava and Yabasha are different words for dry land. The Malbim says it dried in 2 stages. First miracle was it became damp,
and then
very, very dry. Both of those are miracles.
Yeah.
And that explains, when we read the Haggadah again, it says there was this many miracles. I don't see it. There's only one. No. Part of this miracle was that the water stood up. Part of the miracle was that it became wet, then it became dry, and then it became this and that. And then it fell on the Egyptians. There's many, many different stages to this miracle. It's not just one miracle. Like if you had to list all the laws of nature that were broken when the sea was split, you'd be writing all these down. So there's many more than just one big miracle.
I think that the interesting part here it's also ויולך השם את הים ברוח קדים עזה כל הלילה. Like it's God is like trying to show that this miracle is a natural thing. So a warm wind came from the east the whole night, and this warm wind did that the water will be dry, and then will be yabasha and all that. But the greatest but however, it's a great miracle because yes, it was a dry land, but what about this water that they stood up like a jelly, I think, from their right and from their left, and didn't fall to the a dry land.
Yeah, like the water, like honoring the Jewish people who are like a king when he's coming.
Like a red carpet, yeah.
All the slaves are to the side. So like the
Yeah.
water is bound to the Hebrew
Yeah.
people that they are going. This is
Yeah. So
That's
Rashi actually
interesting.
says on the word Vayibaku Hamayim, Medrash basically says, why do you need Vayibaku Hamayim? And the water split. Just say it's split. We're talking about the water. So it says Hamayim Kol Mayim Sheba'olam. So that's the Medrash I mentioned before, that all the water in the world split. Yeah. And in Pasuk Chaf Gimel, it says that the Egyptians chased after them. So the Jews went in. Now the Egyptians obviously saw just a miracle in front of their eyes, but they stupidly went in. Probably another miracle. How do you have a whole nation all be so stupid, the whole army? Kol sus para. There's a problem with these words. Kol sus para. He only had one horse. It says sus is one. Susim is plural for horses, plural. So the question is what? So again, the Medrash says that because Hashem was basically saying, for me, you can bring a million horses, but it's like one horse. It doesn't bother me. It's like, for a human, if you're fighting one horse, you're fighting 100. Hashem, you bring me 1,000 horses. It doesn't bother me.
It's like one.
Huh?
It's like one, right?
Right. It's all like one. It's all the same. So that's why the pasuk says, Kol sus parai, or the horse of parai. As if you just had only.
It's like a poetic
Right.
way. The word kol means that all.
Oh, yeah.
And then you have single horse. But when you have the word all, you can understand that
Right. Of course. Yeah.
many horses,
Yeah.
and maybe they came at once, like in the army. All the soldiers are doing the same.
Same
so
thing.
the sources
That's
too,
a good. Yeah, that's very nice.
they all came together.
Yeah. Then it says, it's just interesting in the second part of that pasuk in 23 Chaf Gimel. Sorry, at the beginning of Chaf Daled 24. And it was in the early morning. So you should know the Gemara often talks about this, how the night is split into three sections. Right? There is the early night, then there's the part around midnight, and then there's the Ashmaris Haboker. Ashmarit Haboker is like the morning shift. The Gemara likes to talk about what Hashem does in the beginning of the night, in the middle of the night, the end of the night. But you see how they were traveling through in the middle of the night, through the desert, through the sea, and it was in the middle of the night when Hashem decided. Now I always think to myself, how are they traveling in the middle of the night? There's no light. There's no light. And nowadays when they fight in Gaza, they have night vision goggles. So actually, the Israelis, they prefer to fight in the night because the Arabs can't see anything, and the Israeli soldiers have night vision, so they can see pretty well. Nowadays, night vision is like $10,000 a piece. It's amazing. You can see in almost pitch black. You can see amazing. But how is the whole Egyptian army traveling in the middle of the night? So, to me, unless you have another answer, the only answer is like honestly, they're not walking around with candles. So the only answer is that the light which the Jewish nation was traveling with, the pillar of fire which traveled before that, also worked for the Egyptians, which again explains how crazy this whole thing was, because that means they're using the light from the Israeli army, from the Jewish army, not really army, from the Jewish people, and they know the second that light goes out, they're stuck in the middle of a sea with no light in 3 a.m. But they still are traveling. It just adds to the, when we talk about all the nisim that we don't really realize from what happened, it adds to the craziness of what an awesome miracle this was, that they collectively lost their mind. And actually, the pasuk literally says that, Vayaham es machane Mitzrayim, at the end of this pasuk, 24, it says he confounded. Vayaham means it's a word of, he made them go crazy. He made them not hallucinate, but he confused the whole camp. Became confused. Shocked, yeah. Interesting, yeah. Shocked. They lost their minds almost. Not in a. It doesn't mean they lost their mind, but it means they weren't able to focus anymore. They were.
In speaking Hebrew, you say amam.
Yeah.
Amam mean someone maybe got any like almost fainted. So
like a daze.
Amam, A-M-M.
Right, no. Yeah. So, no, so
And
this
here,
word,
the word, it's very similar.
Yeah, it's
Vayam.
similar, yeah.
That's the
It's
same thing.
from the
Same
same,
thing.
The same root.
the same
Yeah.
root.
Just
Same,
it's
yeah.
in the future with the reverse
Yeah.
verb makes it the past.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. The next pasuk, Chaf Hey, 25. Vayasar es oifan markavoisa vainhageu b'kvedus. Suddenly, again, to add to the many miracles that happened, their wheels came off, either due to the mud or due to the heat. Depends which medrash you read what happened. But some say they even got lit on fire. So which meant that the chariots, like they say when you're driving very fast and you get a flat tire, that's dangerous.
Mhm.
And the faster you're going, the more dangerous it is. So it's the same. They were traveling as chariots, and when the wheels fall off, that means the chariots drag and then they break and they fall apart, and then they get dragged through. So that's what happened to these evil Egyptians. Vayom Mitzrayim, and then only at that point do we see did they finally wake up? Common sense.
Too late.
Top of page 374. Let's flee. Hashem is fighting for them for Mitzrayim. Now, it's not really in Mitzrayim, you know that. We're out of Mitzrayim, we're in the Sea of Reeds. So it's against the Egyptians, right?
Yeah.
There is one medrash that learns from here, because it says Hashem is fighting in Mitzrayim, in Egypt, that those in Egypt also suffered. There's a medrash that says they also, it doesn't say what happened to them, but they also had suffering that night. But anyway, only at that moment when the chariots started disintegrating and fire and when they started panicking and everything, that did they say, we made a mistake. But by then, like you say, it was too late. Hashem said to Moshe, Pasuk Chavav 26, put your hand and then the water will go back on top of the Egyptians. And that's what he did. And then the water went back to how it was, la'esano, which is a unique word. It's a Hebrew word, but it means to go back to its original state. Itan is it's also a word of strength. But anyway, Umitzrayim nasim lekwate. And meanwhile, they were so disoriented that even those that were not in the water, or they were in the water but it hadn't come on them yet, they ran towards the water. That's how confused they were. But that's not the end of the miracle. When the water fell on the Egyptians, again, one of the many miracles that happened in the next pasuk. In the end of pasuk 27, Zayin, and Hashem stirred. In Hebrew, when you stir a pot, right? You stir it.
Shake.
Shake. Actually, that's a good one. Yeah. I always thought stir, but I think shake is more accurate. To move, yeah. And like a washing machine, yeah.
Mm.
So Hashem shook them around and to make sure that they weren't making it out of there. Again, this was an added part of the miracles. By Yeshua Amayim, the waters came back to how they were, and they covered these Egyptians and all their chariots and all their riders and the horses and everything that was inside. Not one survived. No one survived. Meanwhile, we get reminded that the Jews walked in dry land. Again, the word bayabasha. So some say that the Jews were still walking at this point. The Egyptians were behind them. And as the Jews were walking, the sea was falling in on the Egyptians behind. And then it says, we say this every day in Shachris, Hashem saved the Jews from Mitzrayim, and they saw Mitzrayim. Once they came out, they saw the Egyptians swept up, and they were dead. And they saw the hand of Hashem, and they believed in Hashem, and they believed in Moshe. So it's very, very powerful imagery, and it gets told over in big detail, not just now, but in the whole Shira, the whole song that we're about to read now, the next 20 verses or whatever, is all the details of exactly how this miracle happened, because every element of it was made to show Hashem's strength and Hashem's might.
And this brought the Jewish people to Vayaminu. But only now it says Vayaminu B'Hashem. It means only now the Jewish people completely went after God, and then they could be together getting the
Right.
Torah. And
That's very true. They obviously had some level of belief beforehand because they left Egypt, right? But they had the true belief, like you said, they had, right? If you look at the Targum, the Aramaic translation on the thing, he says Veheminu b'meimra Hashem and bin v'yosei de Moshe Avdei, which in Aramaic means they believed the word of Hashem and in the prophecy of Moshe, his servant, which means that they believed, they now sort of agreed that whatever he says now, we're going to listen. And they obviously saw all the plagues and everything. They're like, whoever this God is, he's pretty good. But now they were like, whatever he says, we're going to listen. And then we saw that when it came to accept the Torah, they did.
and also in Moshe.
And also in the prophecy of Moshe. Right? So this is what you mentioned before, because he was the one that did it. So they were like, well, that was a good party trick. We trust you now. We believe everything that you say. So it's a very, very a powerful message, and there's a reason why in Shabbos every day we say Az Yashir. Every day of the year, doesn't matter, what we say this song of them, because it's so. I often think about this. That with Israel going to war now, a lot of people are bringing what Israel did to Hezbollah as an example of what language you need to talk in the Middle East. What does that mean? That in the Middle East, it's a violent type of world, right? So if you give them flowers, they're not going to understand. If you give them, as we say in Yiddish, tvei pech, some bombs, they remember that. So, many people said you're going to see Hezbollah is going to be very, very quiet now for a long time. Why? Because they suffered a very serious kufa. They got the message. What's the idea? The same goes for Hashem and us. We don't see Hashem, right? Where's Hashem? We don't see open miracles nowadays. And Hashem knew that to create a nation that's going to be able to withstand everything that's going to come for 3,500 years plus, we don't know how long we're going to be, is an impossible task unless you start it with some very, very powerful messages. And this is the powerful message, the Shira. It's not just, details of history. This we have to internalize like we were there, because our souls were there. And our souls were by receiving the Torah. And this idea is that it was such a powerful, like when Israel hits Hezbollah really strong, maybe they're quiet for 10 years, 15 years. This miracle was so big that it entrenched belief in the Jewish nation for 3,000 years. So we don't need to see miracles every day because this miracle was so big.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a very, very important idea. And this is why you'll see leaving Egypt all the time, everywhere we go. It's all about leaving Egypt. Even just these Sukkim, and obviously the brachas that we make in Kiddush, and every time we mention Yitzias Mitzrayim, leaving Egypt, it's supposed to bring in that imagery. These amazing miracles that Hashem did because He loved us, and we'll see later Hashem called us the chosen nation, and this is what the main part of this parish is about. We obviously have not just one song, two songs. The men sang Az Yasher Moshe Ubnei Yisrael, and then on page 380 they have Miriam, the sister of Aaron. She took the music with her, and she sang. Now you see, the men didn't have music. The women had music. Some people say this is why when it comes to the I think the Chasam Sofer says, one of Hasidic rabbis, when it comes to the golden calf, the egel, in where is it? It's in Pesisa. Where is it? You'll see that only the men did it. It says all the men were dancing around with music. Why didn't the women? Because the women already had their music, their Jewish music. They had whereas the men, they didn't sing with music, so therefore they didn't have the level. It's a very nice idea. So they fell into it. But anyway, that's the end. That gets us towards the end of the parsha, and then they travel into the desert. Remember, there was only 3 days between when they, before they started complaining already for the first time. You can see this on page 380. At the bottom, they traveled 3 days. They couldn't find water, and they started complaining again. We just learned that they had faith, but they already started complaining. So if you turn to the back, is page 1331, you'll see the graph of how this happened. At midnight, there's the on the 15th, there's the firstborns. Parish says, get out. During the day of the 15th, they left. On the 16th and the 17th and the 18th, they traveled. They actually traveled for 7 days, right? And then the miracle of leaving on the 21st of Nisan, that was when this is a last day of Pesach, 7th day of Pesach. And finally, on 3 days after that, on the 24th of Nisan, they arrived at Mara. It was called Mara because it was bitter, because they didn't have water to drink, and then a bitter thing happened, and they complained. And we'll see. It was the first of many times when they complained in the desert. Anyway, okay, so we'll finish here. But it's a very, very interesting parasha. And then next week we will do Parashas Yisra, which is also very important, obviously, because it has the actual Aseret HaDibros, the 10 Commandments in Parashas Yisra. Okay. Oh, they also, very important to mention, in the end of this parasha, have a fight with Amalek. Amalek, the first time Amalek come to antagonize us, they antagonize until today. Some people say Hamas is Amalek, but the first time they antagonize us is in this week's parasha, where they come and they saw the miracles, they saw how strong the Jewish nation was, and despite that, just to throw cool water and show, look, you can fight with them, Amalek came to fight with us. And some say, what you want to know who is Amalek, who's not? We have lots of enemies. Who's Amalek? Anyone that fights with the Jews and doesn't care that he kills themselves, just to make a point, that's Amalek. That's why some people say Hamas is Amalek. Because Hamas, they don't care. They lost 50,000 people. They don't care. They would do it again and again and again and again. Because they don't care about themselves. They just want to hit the Jews. That is Amalek type of actions. Amalek, they knew they were going to lose this war. But everyone was, reading in the news, the Jewish nation did all these miracles and they're leaving and they're so powerful and mighty. Amalek said, we're going to go fight them. Just for the sake of it. Just to jump in the bath first and to cool down the waters a little bit. So, and that's why we remember Amalek forever, because Hashem promised He's going to wipe them out forever. Okay. Thank you.
He ordered us to